In the 1960s and 70s, Easter meals weren't ordered online or picked up from grocery stores. Mothers and grandmothers spent entire days preparing dishes that only appeared once every spring. Deviled eggs lined across special serving trays. Scalloped potatoes bubbling slowly in the oven. Coconut cakes resting beneath glass domes while children tried sneaking frosting from the kitchen counter. Some of those dishes have almost disappeared now. Many younger Americans have never tasted real hot cross buns made from scratch or seen a homemade marshmallow lamb cake sitting proudly at the center of an Easter table. But for older generations, these foods still carry something powerful. Memories of crowded dining rooms, church clothes, family laughter, and afternoons that seemed to last forever. These weren't fancy meals. They were meals that made people feel safe, loved, and together. Tonight, we're going back to 10 forgotten Easter foods that once filled American homes with warmth every spring. 1. Hot cross buns Easter morning used to begin with yeast. Not alarm clocks, not television, not phones buzzing beside the bed, just the slow, warm smell of dough rising somewhere in the kitchen before sunrise. Hot cross buns demanded patience from the very beginning. Mothers warmed milk carefully on stovetops before stirring in sugar, butter, and yeast, waiting quietly for the mixture to come alive. Flour followed. Then cinnamon, nutmeg, sometimes raisins soaked overnight so they stayed soft while baking. The dough rested beneath kitchen towels like something sleeping peacefully while the house slowly woke around it. And children always hovered nearby too early. Someone inevitably stole raisins from mixing bowls. Someone poked the dough during rising and got scolded immediately. Family dogs waited hopefully beneath counters for fallen scraps while church clothes hung upstairs untouched for another hour. After baking, white icing crosses were piped carefully across golden tops still warm enough to release steam when pulled apart by hand. But the magic of hot cross buns was never really about flavor. It was timing. You only tasted them once a year. That made them special in a way modern food rarely feels anymore. Today, people can buy cinnamon rolls, pastries, and desserts whenever they want. But hot cross buns belonged only to Easter morning. Their arrival meant winter had officially ended, and spring had finally stepped back into the world again. The flavor itself felt gentle rather than dramatic. Warm spices, soft bread, melted butter, little bursts of sweetness from raisins hidden inside. Comfort disguised as simplicity. And decades later, older Americans still remember the atmosphere surrounding them just as much as the buns themselves. Cloudy spring mornings, sleepy kitchens, parents whispering while coffee brewed, and the strange, peaceful silence that existed before a crowded Easter day fully began. Some foods filled the table. Hot cross buns filled the entire house. 2. Deviled eggs. Deviled eggs were the unofficial competition nobody admitted existed. Every grandmother claimed her recipe was simple. Every grandmother secretly believed hers was superior. And honestly, most families agreed. The process started days before Easter dinner. Dozens of eggs boiled gently on stovetops, while women debated tiny details that somehow mattered enormously. Miracle, whip, or mayonnaise. Yellow mustard or Dijon. Sweet relish or dill. Paprika only on top, or mixed directly into the filling. Tiny decisions. Fierce loyalty. Once peeled, the eggs lined kitchen counters like little white soldiers waiting for inspection. Yolks were mashed with forks until creamy before mayonnaise, mustard, vinegar, pepper, and secret ingredients transformed them into rich golden filling spooned carefully back into the centers. Some women used pastry bags to make perfect swirls. Others believed that was showing off. Meanwhile, children circled nearby, stealing finished eggs directly off serving trays whenever adults looked away for 2 seconds too long. And somehow, despite being one of the cheapest dishes on the table, deviled eggs disappeared faster than almost anything else. Maybe because they carried personality. Every tray tasted slightly different depending on whose house you entered. Some were sharp and tangy, others sweet and creamy. Some dusted heavily with paprika, while others hid tiny bits of pickle or onion inside. They became family identity disguised as appetizers. Today, modern holidays often rely on store-bought platters that taste identical no matter where you go. But deviled eggs belong to a time when recipes traveled through handwritten cards, church cookbooks, and memory instead of internet videos. And somehow that made them feel more alive, because every imperfect little egg quietly carried the fingerprints of the person who made it. 3. Pineapple casserole. The first time most children saw pineapple casserole on an Easter table, they reacted the exact same way. Confusion, because nothing about it made sense. Why was pineapple sitting beside ham? Why was melted cheddar cheese bubbling underneath crushed buttery crackers? And why were adults acting like this strange golden dish was perfectly normal? But then someone's grandmother would scoop a warm spoonful onto your plate anyway. And somehow, against all logic, it tasted incredible. The casserole baked slowly inside heavy glass dishes, while Easter ham roasted nearby. Canned pineapple chunks mixed with sugar and sharp cheddar created this bizarre sweet and salty balance that modern recipes rarely dare to attempt anymore. On top, crushed Ritz crackers soaked in melted butter formed a crispy golden crust that shattered gently under each bite. Nobody really knew where the recipe originally came from. Church cookbooks passed it around for decades, like whispered family folklore. And maybe that was part of the charm. Pineapple casserole belonged to an America where holiday meals weren't curated by professional chefs or filtered through social media trends. Families simply kept making dishes because they reminded people of home. Even the weird ones. Especially the weird ones. Today, younger generations scroll past recipes in seconds if they look unusual. But Easter tables from the 1970s had personality. Some dishes looked strange. Some combinations made absolutely no sense. Yet somehow those meals felt warmer, louder, and more alive than many modern holiday dinners ever do. Pineapple casserole wasn't elegant, it was unforgettable. 4. Carrot raisin salad. Every Easter had at least one bowl that children avoided until adulthood forced them to understand it. Carrot raisin salad was that bowl. It usually appeared cold, bright orange, and suspiciously healthy beside mountains of ham, potatoes, cakes, and casseroles. Grandmothers carried it proudly into dining rooms while kids prayed someone would place it far away from their section of the table. But adults loved it, especially older women. Maybe because it tasted like spring after a long winter. Freshly shredded carrots brought sweetness and crunch. Raisins softened overnight inside creamy dressing, while crushed pineapple added little bursts of sunshine hidden between every bite. Some families added apple slices. Others mixed in walnuts or a spoonful of lemon juice depending on regional traditions. The salad always arrived chilled in large pastel-colored bowls, pulled from refrigerators already overcrowded with Easter leftovers and foil-covered desserts. And somehow, years later, people missed it. Not because carrot raisin salad was the greatest dish ever invented, but because it represented something gentle. It belonged to an era where holidays included small, thoughtful dishes made simply to brighten the table. Nobody was trying to create viral recipes. Nobody cared if children complained about raisins again. The goal was simple. Make the table feel full. Make the room feel cheerful. Make people feel cared for. Modern Easter meals often feel faster now, cleaner, more polished. But carrot raisin salad came from a softer America, one where even the boring side dish still carried somebody's love quietly inside it. 5. Scalloped potatoes. Scalloped potatoes didn't arrive dramatically. There was no grand presentation, no colorful decoration, no fancy garnish. They simply sat there beside the Easter ham in heavy casserole dishes, steaming quietly while butter bubbled around the edges, and somehow they became the dish everybody remembered later. The potatoes were sliced impossibly thin by hand, layer after layer arranged carefully with cream, onions, butter, black pepper, and sometimes shredded cheddar cheese if the family wanted something richer that year. Then the casserole disappeared into the oven for hours, while the entire house slowly filled with one of the most comforting smells imaginable. Warm milk, butter, baked onions, soft potatoes turning golden on top. Children barely noticed the scent at first because they grew up surrounded by it every Easter. But decades later, one bite could suddenly bring everything back. Lace curtains moving in spring wind, grandparents arguing gently in the kitchen, television baseball games playing quietly in another room. That's the strange power scalloped potatoes carried. They were never exciting enough to become famous, but they became part of memory itself. Modern holidays often chase spectacle now: expensive desserts, giant charcuterie boards, restaurant reservations. Yet scalloped potatoes belonged to a generation that understood comfort didn't need attention to matter. Some foods shout. Scalloped potatoes simply stayed beside you quietly for a lifetime. 6. Glazed Easter ham. Every Easter meal revolved around one sound: the slow scrape of a knife across glazed ham, while the head of the family carved thick slices at the center of the table. For a few minutes, conversations usually stopped. Children watched impatiently from their chairs. Steam curled upward beneath dining room lights while the sweet smell of brown sugar, cloves, and roasted meat drifted through the entire house. Even dogs waiting beneath the table seemed to understand something important was happening. Because Easter ham meant abundance, especially for families who grew up during harder decades. The preparation itself felt almost ceremonial. Fathers scored diamond patterns into the surface while mothers brushed glaze over the top again and again during baking. Pineapple rings sometimes covered the outside, with cherries pinned into the center using toothpicks like edible decorations from another era. The ham baked for hours, and everybody knew it. Relatives arrived carrying pies and casseroles while kitchens grew warmer and louder by the minute. Coats piled onto beds upstairs. Children chased each other through hallways wearing uncomfortable church clothes. Then finally, the ham emerged, glossy, golden, beautiful enough to silence a room for 2 seconds before someone inevitably said, "Now that smells like Easter." Today, many families no longer cook meals large enough to feed 12 people at one table. But older Americans still remember the emotional comfort of those oversized holiday dinners where leftovers filled refrigerators for nearly a week afterward. The ham wasn't just food, it was proof the whole family made it home again for another spring. 7. Marshmallow lamb cake. Some Easter desserts looked elegant. The marshmallow lamb cake looked slightly terrifying, and children absolutely adored it because of that. The cake was baked inside heavy lamb-shaped molds found in nearly every American department store during the 1950s through 70s. Once cooled, mothers covered the entire thing in white frosting before pressing miniature marshmallows across the surface to resemble wool. At least, that was the goal. Sometimes the lamb looked beautiful. Sometimes it looked emotionally exhausted. Sometimes it looked like it had witnessed war. Families laughed either way. Candy eyes rolled sideways. Coconut flakes fell everywhere. Frosting stuck to fingers, aprons, countertops, and occasionally curious children trying to help in the kitchen. And somehow those imperfect cakes became one of the most beloved Easter traditions of all, because they felt alive. Modern cakes often look flawless now. Smooth bakery frosting, perfect decorations, professionally styled. But marshmallow lamb cakes carried fingerprints, personality, chaos. You could always tell a real homemade lamb cake immediately because no two ever looked remotely alike. Some leaned sideways. Some cracked during baking. Some lost entire ears before dessert. Nobody cared. The laughter became part of the recipe. And maybe that's why older Americans still remember these cakes so vividly decades later. Not because they tasted better than modern desserts, but because imperfections made holidays feel human. 8. Coconut cake. Coconut cake was Easter elegance. Not flashy elegance, not luxury. The quiet kind. The kind displayed beneath glass cake domes while grandmothers warned children, "Don't touch that until after dinner." Tall white layers stood proudly in the center of dining room tables like spring itself had somehow turned into dessert. Snowy coconut flakes covered thick frosting while tiny decorative flowers or pastel candy eggs rested carefully on top. Making one required patience that modern baking rarely asks for anymore. Cake layers cooled separately across crowded countertops, while someone beat frosting late into the evening after dishes were washed. Coconut ended up everywhere. In mixing bowls, on aprons, across the floor where family dogs happily volunteered cleanup assistance. But once finished, the cake transformed the room. Suddenly, Easter dinner felt official. The flavor itself was soft and comforting rather than dramatic. Vanilla cake, creamy frosting, sweet coconut melting gently into every bite. Nothing aggressive, nothing trendy. Just calm sweetness. And maybe that's why people remember it so emotionally now. Coconut cake belonged to an America where desserts weren't designed for photographs. They were designed to sit at the center of family tables while conversations stretched late into the afternoon. Sometimes beauty doesn't need reinvention. Sometimes it only needs a glass cake stand and people you love nearby. 9. Ambrosia. Salad. Ambrosia salad looked like something invented by children with unlimited access to sugar. Mini marshmallows, whipped topping, mandarin oranges, pineapple, coconut, bright red cherries glowing like Christmas lights inside giant glass bowls. And somehow, adults kept insisting this counted as a salad. Nobody questioned it too hard because Easter only came once a year. The dish appeared constantly throughout the 1960s and 70s at church potlucks, family reunions, and Eastern lunches where folding tables groaned beneath the weight of casseroles and desserts. Women arrived carrying giant bowls wrapped carefully in towels, while children immediately searched for the marshmallows floating on top. Ambrosia didn't taste sophisticated. It tasted happy. Cold sweetness, soft fruit, tiny bursts of cherry syrup, coconut sticking gently to the roof of your mouth while whipped cream melted almost instantly. Every bite felt like childhood refusing to grow up. Modern food culture sometimes laughs at recipes like ambrosia salad now, but that misses the point completely. Nobody made ambrosia to impress strangers. They made it because people smiled when they saw it. And honestly, that might be one of the purest reasons to cook anything. 10. Lemon. Icebox pie. Lemon icebox pie tasted like spring trying to break through winter. Cold, bright, sweet, and sharp all at once, it arrived at Easter tables straight from refrigerators humming softly in crowded 1960s American kitchens. Long before fancy bakery desserts became common in suburban neighborhoods, mothers and grandmothers relied on icebox pies because they felt elegant without requiring expensive ingredients. The pie started simply enough: crushed graham cracker crust pressed firmly into metal pie tins. The filling came together from sweetened condensed milk, fresh lemon juice, egg yolks, and whipped topping folded carefully into pale yellow silk. Then came the hardest part: waiting. The pie had to chill for hours inside crowded refrigerators, already packed with leftovers, deviled eggs, bowls wrapped in foil, and giant pitchers of sweet tea. Children opened refrigerator doors every 15 minutes asking, "Is it ready yet?" Usually, the answer was no. But once served, the whole room changed. The filling was cool and creamy, the lemon sharp enough to wake people back up after oversized Easter meals. Grandparents sipped coffee slowly while sunlight stretched across dining room carpets. Children grew quieter from exhaustion and sugar. Somewhere in another room, someone loosened a necktie and laughed too loudly at an old family story for the 10th year in a row. Lemon icebox pie belonged to that final peaceful chapter of Easter afternoon, when the loud excitement faded and families simply enjoyed being together a little longer before everyone finally drove home. Modern holidays often feel rushed now, but desserts like lemon icebox pie came from a slower America. An America that understood some of the best moments happened after dinner was already over. These Easter dishes were never only about food. Hot cross buns meant Easter morning had arrived. Scalloped potatoes filled homes with warmth. Coconut cakes turned ordinary kitchens into celebrations. Ambrosia salad brought color and laughter to crowded tables. Together, these meals created something modern life often struggles to recreate. Slow afternoons filled with family, conversation, and comfort. Maybe that's why older generations still remember them so clearly. Because the real ingredient wasn't butter, sugar, or cream, it was the feeling of everyone being together in one place, if only for a single spring afternoon.